Right now, somewhere on this planet, two people are nervously texting each other, completely overthinking punctuation. Someone is staring at their phone, wondering if adding a period at the end of a message makes them seem cold and aggressive. Someone else is sending a meme instead of saying how they actually feel. Because the meme is safer, less vulnerable, less terrifying, and deep inside, both of them are absolutely terrified of rejection. Now, here's the question that should keep you up at night. Did cavemen do this too? About 3.5 million years ago, our ancestors weren't even fully human yet. We're talking Australopithecus. Small-brained, bipedal, probably not winning any philosophy awards anytime soon. Walking upright, yes. Writing poetry about it, absolutely not. But here's something fascinating that even most science teachers skip over. Even at that early stage, scientists have found evidence of a dramatic shift in social behavior. A shift that would eventually lead, after millions of years of trial and error and failed situationships, to everything we now recognize as love. Before bipedalism fully kicked in, our primate ancestors were more like gorillas. Massive males, much smaller females, one dominant silverback controlling access to mates through sheer physical intimidation. It was basically ancient toxic masculinity, but with more chest beating and fewer social media posts about it. But something changed when we stood up. As our ancestors transitioned to full bipedalism, the size difference between males and females, what scientists call sexual dimorphism, started shrinking. The males weren't getting grotesquely large anymore relative to females. And that's actually a massive deal that almost nobody talks about. Because in the animal kingdom, the degree of size difference between males and females is one of the clearest signals of what kind of mating system a species uses. Huge size difference? That's a harem-based system. One male, many females. Lots of violence. Closer in size? That usually means pair bonding. Sustained relationships, cooperation, fidelity, at least in theory. In other words, as our ancestors started walking upright, the biological groundwork for something resembling love began to form. Not instantly, not cleanly, but it began. And that is wild to think about. The moment your ancestor stood up on two legs 3.5 million years ago, they were, without knowing it, taking the first physical step toward eventually loving someone. One of the most important and underrated discoveries in the entire story of prehistoric romance is something called mate provisioning. It sounds like a dry economics term. It is, in fact, one of the most ancient love languages we've ever identified. Here's what happened. About 1.8 million years ago, with the emergence of Homo erectus, something new appeared in the archaeological record. Evidence of systematic food sharing. And not just communal sharing with the whole group, evidence of males going out to hunt or forage, and bringing specific food back to specific females and their offspring. Not everyone, specific individuals. From an evolutionary biology standpoint, this behavior only makes logical sense under one condition. The male has to have some degree of confidence that the children he's feeding are his own. Otherwise, from a purely selfish genetic standpoint, why bother? Why spend your energy and take your risks for someone else's offspring? Which means pair bonding. A sustained, preferential, exclusive-ish relationship between two specific individuals. An understanding, however implicit, however unspoken, however grunted, that you are mine and I am yours. Congratulations, you just witnessed the prehistoric invention of bringing someone dinner. Think about that for a second. This isn't metaphorical, this isn't poetic license. The actual, literal origin of the romantic gesture of providing for your partner, going out into a dangerous world and coming back with something specifically for them, is 1.8 million years old. It predates language. It predates fire control. It predates everything we typically associate with human civilization. And in a world where you might get ambushed by a hyena on the way home, or fall into a river, or get into a fight with a rival group, choosing to spend your limited energy and resources specifically on one person is actually deeply, genuinely romantic. It just happens to also involve a dead antelope. But we don't judge. Now let's get into the stuff that really blew my mind when I first read about it. Because food isn't the only way ancient humans expressed romantic preference. Let's talk about ornamentation. Around 100,000 years ago, and there's some evidence pushing this back even further, humans started doing something that had genuinely never happened before in the history of life on Earth. They started decorating themselves. We're talking pierced shells worn as necklaces found at sites in North Africa. Ochre, a red and yellow mineral pigment, rubbed onto skin in patterns. Carved ivory beads, feathers incorporated into clothing or headwear. Jewelry, essentially. Personal decoration, aesthetic self expression, and the question evolutionary biologists have spent decades wrestling with is why? Why would a human being who has to worry about finding enough calories to survive, avoiding apex predators, maintaining social bonds with their tribe, and not dying of infection from a minor cut, why would that person spend time and energy making themselves look appealing? The leading answer is sexual selection. And it was Charles Darwin himself who first articulated this idea that many traits in animals evolve not because they help survival, but because they help attract mates. The peacock's tail is the classic example, completely useless for survival. Actually makes you more visible to predators, but it works spectacularly well for attracting peahens. Human ornamentation works the same way. You decorate yourself to signal, I am creative. I have the cognitive ability to imagine what doesn't yet exist and make it real. I have the physical skill to craft something beautiful. I have enough resources that I can afford to spend time on aesthetics. I am, in short, a high-quality mate. Sound familiar? It should, because we still do this. We dress up for dates, we get our hair done, we carefully choose which photos to put on our profiles. The specific ornaments have changed, shells have become diamonds, ochre has become foundation. But the fundamental impulse driving the behavior is identical. Completely, perfectly identical. But here's the detail that actually stopped me cold when I first came across it. When archaeologists find beads made from the same specific shells at sites that are hundreds of kilometers apart, different groups, different regions, different ecological zones, it suggests that these objects were being traded, passed along networks of human contact across vast distances. Which means these objects had value, social, symbolic, relational value, which means someone, somewhere, 100,000 years ago, received a gift, an object that had traveled far, an object that someone chose specifically to give them. The world's first I saw this and thought of you. I genuinely cannot think about that for too long without feeling something. Let's take a moment to dismantle one of the most persistent myths about prehistoric romance. The idea that ancient human mating was basically just biggest, strongest male wins. Everyone else deal with it. This is the model you see in bad action movies, lazy documentaries, and every conversation with someone who uses evolutionary biology to justify being terrible. And while male competition absolutely existed, we have the broken bones to prove it. The dominant male takes all model is a wildly oversimplified and largely inaccurate picture of how human pair bonding actually evolved. Here's the core reason why. Humans are what biologists call cooperative breeders. Raising a human child is, from a biological standpoint, almost comically difficult and resource intensive. A human baby is born in a state of near total helplessness that would be embarrassing by any other mammal's standards. A baby deer can walk within hours. A baby chimp is physically clinging to its mother within days. A human baby needs someone to do basically everything for it for years. And even after that, the dependency continues for an extraordinary length of time. This creates an evolutionary situation where one parent trying to raise children alone has significantly worse outcomes than two parents cooperating. The math is brutal. Biparental investment isn't just nice to have. It dramatically increases offspring survival rates. And this changes everything about what you're selecting for in a mate. If you're a female in this environment, you don't just want the male with the biggest muscles. You want the male who will stay, who will bring food back, who will help carry things when you're pregnant, who will protect not just aggressively, but consistently over years, not just in the dramatic moment of a fight. You're not just selecting for strength. You're selecting for reliability, for loyalty, for what we might as well call commitment. And if you're a male, the calculus changes too. You're not just trying to mate with as many females as possible. You're investing in a partnership, a long-term cooperative venture. You want someone with whom you can build something durable. This is the evolutionary origin of love's deeper dimension. Not just lust, not just attraction, but attachment, the specific, almost irrational desire to be with this particular person, not just any viable option. the feeling that one specific human has become irreplaceable in a way that defies simple logic. Love as a survival strategy, one of the most simultaneously cynical and beautiful ideas in all of science. Okay, but here's the question I know has been forming in your mind this entire time. Sure, the behaviors were there. The pair bonding, the provisioning, the ornamentation. But did ancient humans actually feel anything, or was it all just unconscious biological programming? Were there actual emotions, actual longing, actual heartbreak? This is where things get both fascinating and, honestly, a little bit devastating. We can't put an ancient human on a brain scanner. We can't ask a Homo erectus to describe what it feels like to miss someone. But we have clues, and some of them are extraordinary. First, the neurological evidence. By roughly 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had essentially the same brain architecture we have today. The limbic system, the brain's emotional core, responsible for attachment, fear, pleasure, grief, longing, was fully formed and fully operational. The neurochemical systems that produce what we experience as love, dopamine flooding the reward circuits when we see someone we're attracted to, oxytocin creating the bond of deep attachment, vasopressin driving the protective possessiveness we feel toward partners, all of that was already in place. The hardware existed, which means the software almost certainly ran on it. The feelings were there. But then there's the Shanidar cave evidence. And this one hits different. In the 1950s, archaeologists excavating Shanidar cave in what is now Iraq discovered the bones of a Neanderthal man. And not just any Neanderthal. One who had clearly lived with severe, debilitating disabilities. A withered, likely useless right arm that had been injured or deformed early in life. Healed fractures suggesting major trauma. Possible vision impairment in one eye. The kind of injuries that, in any pure survival of the fittest scenario, should have resulted in death long ago. But he hadn't died young. The bone evidence showed he had lived for decades after these injuries. Years and years of survival in one of the harshest environments imaginable. As a person who could not have hunted, who could not have gathered effectively, who could not have contributed the physical labor that prehistoric life demanded. He survived because other people kept him alive, chose to feed him, chose to protect him, chose to spend their limited resources keeping someone alive who could not immediately reciprocate. This is not survival instinct. This is not logical resource optimization. This is care for the sake of caring. This is attachment that persists past usefulness. This is, at its core, love, in the broadest, deepest sense of the word. And Neanderthals, let's not forget, shared approximately 99.7% of their DNA with us. They interbred with Homo sapiens. If you're of non-African descent, you are carrying Neanderthal DNA in your genome right now. These were not alien creatures. They were cousins, close cousins. If they could love like that, and the evidence very strongly suggests they could, then the emotional life of ancient Homo sapiens was almost certainly richer, deeper, and more recognizable to us than we've ever given it credit for. Let's talk about jealousy, because no conversation about love is complete without acknowledging its shadow. Jealousy is not flattering. Nobody lists it as their best quality, but it is ancient and understanding. Why it exists actually illuminates a lot about how prehistoric love worked. The evolutionary logic is not complicated. If you have formed a pair bond with someone and you are investing enormous time and resources into raising children with them, children who carry your genetic lineage, then any threat to that bond represents a direct threat to your evolutionary future. The brain treats it like an emergency. Hormones spike, attention narrows, behavior becomes protective, sometimes aggressively so. Cross-cultural studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer societies, which provide our most reliable window into prehistoric social dynamics, consistently show that a significant proportion of male violence is connected to mate competition and perceived infidelity. This isn't a modern pathology. This is ancient wiring. But here's the flip side of that coin, because it matters. The same wiring that produces jealousy also produces fidelity. The same attachment system that makes you reactive to threats makes you genuinely devoted to your partner. Vasopressin, one of the key neurochemicals of pair bonding, produces not just possessiveness, but loyalty, protection, the drive to maintain the bond not through control, but through presence and commitment. So when you feel jealous, genuinely, irrationally, uncomfortably jealous, you are running a program that is approximately 200,000 years old. You are not broken. You are just ancient, which is either comforting or deeply unsettling, depending on your perspective, and honestly, it might be both at the same time. Let me tell you about music, because this might be my favorite part of the entire story. The oldest confirmed musical instruments ever found are flutes, carved from vulture bone and mammoth ivory, discovered in caves in southwestern Germany, dated to approximately 40,000 years ago. They are genuinely beautiful objects, precisely crafted, deliberately designed to produce specific sounds. But 40,000 years is almost certainly not when music began. It's just when the instruments became durable enough to survive. Percussion instruments made of wood, voice, body slapping, bone structures that leave no trace. Music made purely from the human body and perishable materials leaves nothing in the ground for us to dig up. The true origin of music is almost certainly much, much older. And music matters enormously in the story of love because it is the universal emotional technology of human connection. Every single human culture on Earth, without exception, uses music in courtship, singing to attract a mate, dancing together, which is synchronized movement and a powerful indicator of physical and social compatibility. Using melody and rhythm to communicate emotional states that words either can't reach or haven't existed long enough to handle. Darwin himself proposed that music evolved primarily as a mechanism for sexual selection, that our ancestors developed musical ability for the same reason peacocks developed elaborate tails: to attract, to impress, to communicate. I have something worth choosing. What this means in practical terms is extraordinary. 40,000 years ago, and probably long before that, someone was serenading someone else, sitting by a fire in a cave in Ice Age Europe, playing a bone flute, watching someone across the flames, using sound to cross the impossible distance between two nervous, hopeful, terrified human beings, using music to say, "I feel something. I made this for you. Do you feel it too?" Let's take a moment to ask the monogamy question, because it always comes up and the answer is genuinely interesting. The evidence points to what evolutionary biologists call socially monogamous, with some facultative polygyny, which is academic language for people mostly paired up one-on-one. Those pairs were socially recognized and culturally reinforced, but it wasn't rigidly universal, and the edges were always a bit messy. The slight size difference between human males and females suggests our mating system sits somewhere between the full polygyny of gorillas and the near-perfect monogamy of gibbons. We're biologically in the middle. Socially, though, that's where culture and emotion do the heavy lifting that pure biology leaves undone. What we know from anthropological surveys of hunter-gatherer cultures around the world is that while many of them permit polygyny as a theoretical option, the vast majority of actual relationships in practice are pair bonds. Most people are in a committed one-on-one partnership most of the time. Those partnerships are recognized by the community, often ritualized and protected by social norms. Ancient love wasn't perfect. It wasn't always faithful. The evidence for conflict and jealousy and violence makes clear that it was messy and painful and human in all the ways that word implies. But the pair bond, two people choosing each other, building something together, raising children together, protecting each other, was the dominant social unit, the foundation of everything built on top of it. Here's where it all comes together. Here's the thing I actually want you to walk away with. Love is not a modern invention. It is not a product of civilization or literacy or leisure time or romantic poetry. It is not something humans developed after we had food security and enough free time to think about our feelings. It was there first. It was there before cities, before agriculture, before language, before fire control. It was there at the very beginning of what it means to be human. And the argument can be made very seriously and with significant scientific backing that it is actually one of the things that made us human. Pair bonding drove the development of language because you need to communicate with a partner in ways that grunting can't fully cover. It drove the development of music and art because you need new tools for expression and attraction. It drove the expansion of cooperation and community because love for a partner extends into love for children, and love for children extends into love for their community, and suddenly you're building a society. Love didn't follow human civilization. Human civilization followed love. that Homo sapiens sitting in East Africa 100,000 years ago, watching someone across the fire, feeling something without having the words for it yet, something warm and confusing and terrifying and magnetic and completely irrational, they were feeling exactly what you have felt, what you will feel again, what every human being who has ever lived in every time and every place has felt. The shell necklace they made, the food they carried back, the music they played into the dark, the person they chose to stay with, different details, same feeling. So the next time you're staring at your phone, paralyzed by the question of whether to use a period or not, or you feel that terrifying weightless freefall of caring about someone more than you feel comfortable admitting, just know this. You are doing something ancient. Something so old it has no beginning we can find. Something so fundamental to the human experience that it stretches back past language, past tools, past everything that separates us from the animals we came from. Every single one of your ancestors, going back further than imagination can reach, felt what you are feeling. They handled it imperfectly, messily, sometimes violently, often beautifully. And somehow, impossibly against all odds, through ice ages and droughts and predators and rival tribes, each of them figured it out just enough to keep going. Which is why you're here. Which is, when you think about it, the most romantic thing I've ever said.